Hey, what's up, folks? This is the Political Brown Kid here, PBK. Thanks for tuning in. And today is June of 2020. And I just kind of wanted to make a real quick post because I seen on TV in relation to this unfortunate event of George Floyd's death. And we do send our condolences or my condolences to the family and friends and all of his loved ones and people who knew and loved him and cared about him. And, we just wanted, a very unfortunate event that happened to him. And so in the wake of his death, of course, I'm pretty sure everyone, even not just here in America, but all over the world, people are protesting. Those protests are mixed in with rioting. And then you hear on television people talking about the unfortunateness of, if that's even a word, I said unfortunateness, but the unfortunate events of people rioting in addition or in the midst of the protests, and people trying to separate out the two. And, you hear these straight-laced suits on television. These people sometimes they really irritate me but I get it. You're trying to be quote unquote, a professional. You're on TV. You're working in a quote unquote professional, civilized environment. So you have to say things that are going to be politically correct. And so you're going to say all of the politically correct terms. Like, even with this COVID thing, everybody's trying to use the jargon, together we'll get through this and all that crap. It sounds good. I guess people think they need a slogan to believe in. I'm digressing into COVID, so let me just get back on track. But you have these suits on TV, and they're looking at the riots when the riots first started, because now it's June of 2020, and the riot. It's like a couple of weeks into June, a little over a week, should I say? And the riots have pretty much subsided. They've died down, but a lot of things got burned. A lot of neighborhoods, high-end neighborhoods, should I say, particularly like when you look at Beverly Hills in California, you're looking in New York City, you're looking in Chicago, a lot of neighborhoods, non-black neighborhoods got burnt down. And so you have these news reporters coming on TV talking about, and not even just news reporters, just other TV personalities talking about riots and they're not effective and why are people rioting and blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I mean, like I said, I'm going to give you guys inconvenient truths here. Personally, to be honest with you, it's unfortunate that a lot of businesses have burnt down. And, I feel bad for the business owners because these business owners didn't have anything to do with it. So I'm going to start off by saying that. I'm conflicted by how I feel about the riots. I'm going to be honest with you. You have these news reporters up here talking about it's not productive. It doesn't help the movement. It doesn't get things done. Riots do get things done. Let's be honest. Let's have an inconvenient truth here. Rioting and tearing stuff up. I want to use my other word, my adult, uncivilized, barbaric words, but I'm going to try and keep my podcast and my media content clean as much as possible until I get off track and derail myself. But the inconvenient truth is that riots work. And, in a way, like I said, I'm conflicted and I'm enjoying some of this stuff. I'm not enjoying seeing people's stuff get torn down, but trust me, I've experienced, and maybe I shouldn't say I've experienced, but I've been taught and I've seen the remnants of history of riots. And typically when black people have gone through this, and again, this is nothing new. All history is cyclical. All of this stuff is just like Ving Rhames said in Baby Boy. If you ever watch Baby Boy, John Singleton's movie Baby Boy with Tyrese Gibson and the lovely Taraji Henson in it, Baby Boy walks into the room and Baby Boy basically schools Tyrese and says, he's talking about, stabbing people, cutting people up and, all the stuff that he's done and how he's quote unquote put in work in the streets. And he basically lets Tyrese know, who's a younger cat. He basically like, all of this is a rerun to me. This may be new to you, but this is just a rerun to me. And for me, in a way, that's kind of how I feel. Even though I haven't seen it all or did any of this stuff, you've been taught this in history. Also, being growing up, being a born and raised Washingtonian, and I mean DC proper, in the district, Northeast DC, you can ride through the city and you've seen abandoned building. And I'm talking about, I was born in the 70s. So I'm after Martin Luther King. But when I became old enough to drive, and even driving around with my parents, they would show you, look, you ride down the major thoroughfares and you can see row houses that were burnt up in the 60s riots when Martin Luther King died, and see those buildings still there, not fixed up, just there. And those were the impacts of 1960. So we're talking about 20 years later, those buildings weren't fixed up. But here's the deal. I'm just kind of giving you guys that, but riots do work. You have people, if those people had just marched and peacefully, because that's what society wants you to do. They want you to march peacefully. They want you to take that Martin Luther King approach, and I'm going to do a post about that, which is probably going to tick a lot of you people off. I'm probably going to lose my whole audience when I talk about the Martin Luther King thing. I love Martin Luther King, but we're going to have to talk about it. But getting back on topic, but I'm just forewarning you that that's coming up. Be on the lookout for it if you want to hear my notional conversation on that. But when you look at the movement of Martin Luther King, the effectiveness, the marches bring awareness. The marches bring awareness and they get you sympathy. I guess sympathy. And the reason why I said he got sympathy was because when people start sicking dogs on you and people start using water hose, and by the way, that's where I learned I never knew a water hose had that much power or pressure. That's where I learned how strong and powerful water hoses were, by watching videos of white police officers using water hoses on peaceful protesters and spraying them, and watching a 200-pound man, a grown muscular man, fly 20, 30 feet down the street from a water hose. But again, I'm getting back on topic, but that's a part of it. But watching those peaceful protesters, and then people sicking dogs on you, cops hitting you with a billy. And I come from a law enforcement family. My father's a police officer. Trust me, a billy club is hard. He used to have them in the house. Those things are it's like, did they make this wood extra dense or something? But getting hit with those type of billy clubs, getting dogs sicked on you, getting water hoses on you, getting punched, it gets you sympathy when you're just being non-violent. But how far did it really get them, really? Like I said, that gets you the notice. It gets you awareness. It gets you TV time, because people are like, oh, look at these people marching. But the effectiveness of Martin Luther King's movement, which a lot of people don't want to talk about. See, like I said, today, these news people will say, oh, don't burn things down, because it's the politically correct thing to say. It's politically correct to be, no, we're not going to be barbaric. We all have to be civilized. They have to say that. They're sitting in the studio in a suit. Excuse me. But the truth of the matter is, Martin Luther King, the peaceful protest, got you visual coverage. But it was pretty much, number one, I'll say one thing before I talk about the riots, because you know that's coming. But it was also the boycotts. The boycotts of the public services and of businesses that drew attention to the cause. And that's what got things done. The boycotts was the first thing. Because once Martin Luther King and his movement, and people who supported his movement, once they mobilized enough people to say, hey, look, we're not going to take public transportation anymore. We're not going to start paying for these public services and funding these services or these businesses that disrespect and treat us and don't treat us with humanity. We're not going to give them any money. We're going to sacrifice. And that's the other thing that blacks don't do in 2000 and X, 2000 and whatever, Y2 whatever. There's no sacrifice from any black person. And I'm using an absolute there. I'm using an absolute. You don't have any Martin Luther Kings, any Medgar Evers, any Malcolm X's, you Patrice Lumumbas, Nelson Mandelas. You don't have them. I can't really name one, not right now. That's going all in. Can't name one. I mean, maybe it's slipping my mind right now, but right now I just can't name one. We've gotten very comfortable. We've gotten jobs. We've gotten a little bit of money. We've gotten iPhones or Androids, and we're happy. Got video games, got cable TV, got a decent house in the suburbs, and we got clothes and we got cars and we got comfortable. But I'm digressing. But once they implemented those boycotts and those black people started, I'm talking about black women wearing high heel shoes and dresses, walking miles to get to and from their destinations, or carpooling with whomever had a car. And they stopped servicing a lot of these businesses and these public services. Then the government listened. Then the people wanted to listen, whether it was the local government, state government, or whether it was the federal government. Then people listened to the movement. The marches and protests mean that's just a show. Nobody cares about that. That just makes for something to watch on TV, but it's not effective in my personal opinion. Then, in addition to the boycotts, it was the riots. And the riots came it came from Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, in his nonviolence, that's the irony of this whole thing. Martin Luther King's whole movement was nonviolent, but when he died, they burnt everything down to the ground. When I say they, I'm talking about black people. And maybe some angry white people were in there that was supporting the movement too. I don't know. But black people went crazy. And I shouldn't say crazy. I'm talking about crazy probably in a good way. But black people, they really said, nah, you know what? The nonviolent thing isn't going to work. I need to vent some frustration. And they tore down this country. The only unfortunate part about that situation during that time was they tore down their own neighborhood. So, I mean, yeah, people cared. You know, small businesses cared. Some non-black people who had invested in their neighborhood, because mind you, not every person, you know, black people didn't own the businesses in those neighborhoods. Not all of them. You know, there were a lot of them. A lot of those businesses, I'm pretty sure, were owned by whites. So those businesses suffered and those white people suffered. But the other majority of that was really pretty much black suffering, because they tore down their own stuff. And it was like, now where am I going to shop at? Now I got to go extra blocks to shop. And those white neighborhoods were protected. So in his nonviolent movement, there was violence due to his death. So that's the irony. And from that violence begat legislation and attention to say, you know, we hear you. And the same thing has happened with the George Floyd movement. You know, the protests, yeah, they're good. They're good to see. And, you know, people didn't listen, because you think about this. When even after the Martin Luther King situation, the next big riot that I could recall, that this is just from my recollection, you know, and again, I wasn't around for Martin Luther King's death and the violence that came from that. I came afterwards, you know, I was born afterwards. But, you know, the next big riot that I can probably remember would be Rodney King. Rodney King's not death. Don't let me say that. I misspoke. I'm sorry. But Rodney King's brutal beating. The brutal beating on videotape, and the exemption. And it really came, you know, because people thought with the videotape, again, here we are. Like I said, everything's cyclical, and black people keep falling for the banana in the tailpipe. They like Charlie Brown with the football. You know, but it started with Rodney King, and I can't blame him for the Rodney King one, because that was the first time videotape was actually shown. I should say the very first time, but the first time in modern era of my lifetime, video of police brutality was shown. And, you know, people waited because they thought the police officers were going to get convicted, and they didn't. And when they didn't, California particularly went crazy. And the unfortunate thing about that is, when riots occur, the unfortunate part about riots, like I said, I think riots do serve, because riots do force people to act. Because when the only thing it seems like I can't speak for other countries, but I can speak for America. The only thing Americans respect, and most people in America respect, is violence. It's unfortunate, but it's true. You show some violence, people start to respect you because people operate off fear, unfortunately. But let me get back on track. The unfortunate part about riots is there's a lot of collateral damage. A lot of the people who are impacted, like in all of that rioting, none of the cops that were involved in the Rodney King beating got their asses whooped. And they should have. They should have gotten their asses whooped. I mean, just personally speaking, this is just my personal opinion. They should have gotten their asses whooped, and they could have known how it felt, how Rodney King felt getting his ass whooped. But unfortunately, it's Reginald Denny who had nothing to do with anything, at least as far as my knowledge. Maybe I'm wrong, but as far as my knowledge, this man is an innocent man, just happened to be driving his truck, wrong place, wrong time. And I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, he still probably has impacts, I think, from his, from that brutal beating. Someone throws a brick into your face. And I think he still has that, those, injuries to this day. Debilitating injury to this day. I hope he's still alive. I haven't looked him up. I hope he's still here on this planet. I hope he's doing well. But unfortunately, it's people who have nothing to do with anything. White guy, nothing to do with anything. And some other white guys that out here in the streets fooling around, beating people with sticks on videotape. In the street, they're walking around free, protected, leaving the courthouse, and other people's businesses get burnt down. And Reginald Denny, and as well as others, take a beating for it. It's always collateral damage. But again, I will say this, I'll stand by it. Riots serve a purpose, because when those riots occurred, then it was like, okay, something has to be done. Then the attention and the awareness comes. Fast forward, but obviously people still don't learn their lesson, because fast forward to 2020, we have George Floyd. And again, the protests and the march start. Yeah, and people just look at it. Yeah. And think about this. Even before that, when Eric Gardner died. So let me back up a little bit. Eric Gardner dies. He can't breathe. LeBron James and company, everyone wears a shirt. NBA try to show support for Eric Gardner, who's died tragically. Another death. And I'm sorry for his family. And, I do send my condolences out to his family. But the NBA tries to show support, and people on TV get upset. Newscasters, speculators, and, people who cover sports, whatever you want to call them, sports analysts. This is inappropriate. The NBA tries to shut it down. They try to give them a little bit of leeway, but they don't let them carry it too far. Poor WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association. Oh my God, they treat these women horrible. These women were, I think some of them got suspended for trying to protest. The men, nothing happened to the men. Women, they couldn't even get a protest going. They suffered more retribution than the men. Everyone talking about NBA, there's no room for this, for politics and sports. Colin Kaepernick can't take a knee. And all of these black people are trying to bring peaceful awareness to let you guys know you guys ain't right. If you had just listened to Colin Kaepernick and LeBron and all of the WNBA players, and if you had listened to these people were trying to silently protest, and no one cared about that. Right? You didn't pay any attention. You didn't have any motion, take any action. I was just reading something about a black transgender person that worked for L'Oreal. Don't know the name. I do apologize about that. And just reading that, but you can look it up. They lost their job trying to bring awareness to racial injustice, because back then when Eric Gardner dies, and I don't know the year when he died, but it was 2000 and something, past 2010, I do believe, maybe a little bit around that time. When he died, they wanted to shut conversation down about race. Protest, people didn't care about it. There were no riots during this point, really. Not significant riots. Let me say that, not significant. And they shut it down. News people didn't care. Analysts didn't care. No one cared because it was just protests. Now you get to George Floyd and it escalates to riots. Probably $1 billion in damages done in total in the United States, across the country. Damn near tore Chicago up. Minneapolis tore the hell up. LA tearing stuff up. Civil unrest. People don't want to, people just want to protest all day. People have had it. People are fed up. And when the riots occurred now, because like I said, the protest people didn't care. Now that the riots occurred, guess what we have? I'm hearing on TV now, every NBA commissioner, NFL commissioner, we hear you, Black Lives Do Matter. We get it. Now you want to have an acknowledgement of it. I'm just looking, every time I can't even turn on anything without hearing about some white person wanting to apologize. This wasn't because of the protest. Trust me, it's not because of the protest. It's because they don't want to see black people tear anything else down. And white people, because white people out here tearing stuff down too. They out here tearing stuff down too. But it's not, trust me, it's not the civil protest that's put these people in check. It is the riots that's got people shook. I logged into my Netflix account, and I'm going to have to talk about Netflix, that racist organization. At least in my personal opinion, let me put it that way. Netflix, in my personal opinion, I think is a racist. It's moronic, and if you know the term moron that I use, it's misguided information, misguided orator of racially ornate news. But Netflix is a moron, and we're going to talk about that. But Netflix, I turn on my Netflix account, and before I can even log in, there's a page, a splash page that you go to first that says, if you want to learn about black issues, check this out. And, they got they're just showcasing black stuff. And we stand with black people and to celebrate the blackness. Check out these Netflix titles. Logged into something else. Shows the black experience. They got all these damn movies in there. They just highlighting everything black. You turn on TV, now they want to force loving down my damn throat. And we're going to talk about this interracial stuff too. That's, white people love to think that, having sex in our way out of racism is the answer to everything. And some of you dumb, ignorant blacks have bought into that. But we're going to talk about that. But you can't even turn on the cable television without them trying to show you Loving and all of these other black movies, or just about black people holding hands, or about the black experience. Now I think I heard one of these white tech companies now wants to have Juneteenth celebrations. We couldn't even, it's probably about 200 Jewish people in America. And trust me, if you're in the state of Maryland, I'm telling the truth. 200 Jewish people in probably the whole part of Maryland, and they get a holiday for the school system. Muslims don't have a holiday for their holiday, and blacks damn sure don't get a holiday except Martin Luther King. That's everybody's holiday. We didn't get a Day of Atonement, which Farrakhan tried to put out for the Million Man March. We don't get that day. We don't get Juneteenth. Well, Juneteenth is probably in the summertime, but they didn't give us any celebrations. It's like 300 Jewish people in Maryland. The whole school system shut down for them. But now, and no one respects, and the federal government should have been the first person to celebrate Juneteenth. Should be fireworks forever on Juneteenth, from June 13th through June 19th. Nothing. But now that the country is burning and on fire and people of businesses are destroyed, when you start talking monetary damages and threatening somebody's loss of making a living, a loss of business, and possibly loss of life, then people start listening. People start listening. You can't even walk down the street. Now, every time you turn on the TV, I hear you, black people. We're with you. Black lives do matter. Black lives matter. Like I said, you turn on Netflix, splash page. Black people, we love you. Here's some black movies for you to watch. Turn on regular cable. You get all these black titles. Black, blackly, black, just like in CB4. It is black all day, all the time, because they're tearing stuff down. They've had it, and they're fed up, and rightfully so. The Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party, same thing. They throwing tea in the water. That's violent. That's protesting and rioting. That's a riot. Shooting started. Things got out of control. People only listen when you start tearing things down. It's and trust me, I'm not sitting up here advocating that you go out and tear something up. I'm just pointing out the facts. The facts are that people only respect violence. It's just a truth, at least here in America. I can't speak for other countries. I can't speak for Europe. I can't speak for France. I can't speak for Russia. I can't speak for Africa. I can't speak for any other country. This is my only experience right here. And I can tell you from my past experience, people only respect violence. When I'm growing up, like I said, I told you, I grew up, born and raised Washington, D.C. in the 80s. The height of gangsterism in D.C. And I can tell you this, if you got into a fist fight with somebody, y'all probably the next day were going to be the best of friends because they respected you because you stood up for yourself, whether you won or lost. It's just how human beings are built. It's probably how men are built, should I say. I can't speak for women, but it's how men are built. It's just how things get done, unfortunately. That's why you have wars. Nobody have negotiations. People have wars because people go into negotiations and negotiations break down because no one respects words. It's unfortunate. I'm not sitting up here saying that, that's the case. I mean, that's the way it should be. I'm just giving you the facts. No one respects words. Look at the president now. You go talk to China. China talks to you. Y'all both like, man, bump you. I ain't thinking about you. Let's go to war. It ain't a physical war. It's a currency war. It's a price war. It's a tariff war. It's a financial war, should I say. It's a war of finances. I'm gonna tax your goods, you tax my goods, and we're gonna see which country can survive it. That's what people respect. That's similar to a boycott. It's a monetary war. And if that doesn't work, then they get the militaries involved. And you start blowing stuff up. And then that's the only thing people respect. And it's unfortunate. I'm not trying to say that life should be like that. I'm just pointing it out. So when you start listening to these ignorant news people on TV, they're only saying this because they have to say it, because their job won't allow them to say anything else. Because if they say something else, they're going to get fired. And that's unfortunate that we play political correctness with people being able to speak their mind. But the bottom line is that the riots have helped. There's no doubt about that. Boycotts, people don't even boycott anymore, so y'all can cancel that out. Ain't nobody boycotting their iPhones. Ain't nobody boycotting playing video games and their cable subscriptions. Nobody's going to boycott their Spotify's or whatever kind of subscriptions you got going on, because people are weak in 2K, in the 2KX, whatever 2K you're in, whatever 21st century year you're in, people are weak. Black people, white people, Asian people, we're all weak. No one's going to boycott because no one wants to make that type of sacrifice. But they'll go out and tear something up, though. And that's just a fact. So I just wanted to drop this little jewel on you guys. Bottom line is, unfortunately, protests do work. Riots do even better. This is the Political Brown Kid. Stay tuned. Check out my other content, and we'll see you around.